Welcome to another episode of We Don't Die, where my goal is to give you evidence that although our bodies will disappear, we survive physical death. I'm your host, Sandra Champlain, author of the international best-selling book called We Don't Die, A Skeptic's Discovery of Life After Death. My guest today comes from London, England, but she says she remains close to her Scottish roots. Her name is Maggie La Tourelle, and she has a fascinating story. She is an author, therapist, and teacher, and for over 30 years has integrated psychotherapy, NLP, kinesiology, and energetic healing into her holistic therapy practice. Maggie has lectured at some of the UK's leading universities and has been running professional training courses for many years. On a personal note, Maggie has 10 years of hands-on experience helping to care for her parents at the end of their lives. She's an author of a couple of books. One is The Principles of Kinesiology, and her latest book is called The Gift of Alzheimer's: New Insights into the Potential of Alzheimer's and Its Care. I really believe that Maggie can provide some incredible evidence of the hereafter, but also that she can inspire all of us today to lead even greater lives after we listen to her story. Maggie La Tourelle, welcome to We Don't Die Radio.
Thank you, Sandra. It's a pleasure to be with you, and thank you for inviting me.
Oh, my pleasure. It's always so synchronistic how I find my guests. My dear assistant, Kathy, has great intuition, and she found you or you found her. I'm not really sure, but it doesn't matter because we're here together. So, where do we start, Maggie, with your incredible story?
Ooh.
You know you more than
Yeah.
me, and I'm fascinated by all the things you've done for so long, but maybe you could give us a little bit of your story, how you even maybe got into this world of kinesiology, NLP, all these
Yeah.
holistic things.
Yes. Well, actually, my journey into exploring consciousness started in my 20s. And so for many, many years, I was reading books, attending talks, attending groups, and just building up my knowledge and experience and changing my way of thinking and being in the world. So that led me from what was I doing? So at one point, I worked in the fashion industry in the 60s,
Uh-huh.
but it led me over time to discovering that I was sensitive to energy. And I thought, well, I better do some training in this. So I trained as a healer and discovered all sorts of amazing things. And I should say to begin with that I was naturally skeptic. I was not just taking everything at its face value. So I discovered through my own experience that, it's possible to see auras. Um, I believe that I had experience of some past lives.
Hmm.
I could see colors. I was sensitive to colors. Um, and that led me then to thinking, well, this is all very well, but if I'm working with people, I want to be able to communicate with them. And this is where kinesiology came in, because kinesiology uses manual muscle testing to communicate directly with the body. So I studied kinesiology and became a Touch for Health instructor. And I've found that a wonderful way of communicating with people about what's happening in their body, because it's really I'm just there as a catalyst. It's their body that's important. So I work very much with a person-centered approach. I also trained in NLP, which I found offers excellent models for communicating with people and having an understanding of how they think and how they behave.
Can you
So
tell us? I hate to interrupt you.
yeah, it's okay.
In my book, I talk a little bit about kinesiology, um, and I know I talk about hypnosis, but I don't think I talk about NLP. Can you just give a definition to those two things just before we go on for some of our listeners that might not be familiar with those terms?
Yes. Well, kinesiology is a system that uses manual muscle testing to communicate directly with the body. and it can be used almost like a dowsing tool to get yes/no answers from the body, or it can be used as a holistic system because it is based on the acupuncture system.
Hmm.
So as well as answers to questions, every muscle that's tested has an energetic link with an acupuncture meridian, and therefore, the function in the body of related to that meridian. So it is a very holistic system, and it's based on a paradigm which is the triad of health, that has one side which is structure, one side chemistry, and one side emotions, and all that is contained within the field of energy.
Very good.
That's my definition of kinesiology.
It's great. And even for listeners right now, if you go to WeDon'tDieRadio.com and you click on Maggie La Tourelle's page, I'll have a link to some more information about kinesiology and even the link to her book on that, because it's a very real thing and very, very fascinating.
And also on my website, I have a separate website for my therapy practice, and you can very easily go from the homepage of the book to that website, which gives more information about kinesiology.
Okay, just quick, what is that website? Just so.
It's maggielatourelle.co.uk.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Right? Now, NLP, that stands for Neurolinguistic Programming, which is such a horrible title. It's a study of excellence. And in neurolinguistic programming, the founders modeled people that they found were very good at whatever they were doing.
Mm-hmm.
And with these, they found they could teach these models to others, so that anybody who's learned the model can do the same thing and also be excellent. So it's really the study of excellence, but it has ramifications that go into, the structure of language and, hypnosis. It's a very vast field now. I trained back in the 80s when it was still developing, really.
Wow.
And but I found it's become a core. It's hardwired into my brain now, and it's core.
That's great. And neurolinguistic programming, NLP, is another thing that if there's something you want in your life, or I've never heard it as the study of excellence, but it really is to create new patterns and new behaviors. It very much empowers you to have those results in your life. So another very cool study that is in your bag of tricks, Madame. All right, now back to you and your story.
Yeah.
Thank you for the commercial break.
So when my mother was diagnosed with Alzheimer's in the year 2000, and I should say that back then it wasn't as talked about as it is now, but I was able to bring my experience and skills to the situation. So I was also, as you mentioned earlier, working as a psychotherapist. So I was able to be with her, not as a therapist, but I was able to listen to her in a way that some people maybe wouldn't think to listen. And if I just give a little background
Sure.
to this story, she was diagnosed in the year 2000, but I suspect she probably had Alzheimer's before that, and we didn't know. I mean, people weren't looking out for it then, and I was living in London and just visiting from time to time. My father was in his early 90s and struggling a bit himself. Anyway, my mother was diagnosed, and for a couple of years she lived at home with help coming in, and it was an absolute nightmare. It just got worse and worse. And I want to say this because it sounds like, the gift of Alzheimer's is some, other world.
Right.
It's not the world that most people experience, but I can assure you, we were tearing our hair out, and I was trying to manage the arrangements at a distance and going up to Scotland, say, for 1 week a month to try and help out. And then 2 years later, when she was a danger to herself and those around her, she went into a care home, which happened to be next door to our family house. which is
Mm-hmm.
really convenient.
Sure.
And it also didn't feel as if we were putting her in a home. It felt like an extension to our own home because we knew the staff, we knew the owner. It's an independent care home. It was, it couldn't have been an easier transition.
Great.
And at the same time, it was very painful, when that happened. But she'd been in the care home for nearly a year. And then she started to say things that I thought were a bit strange and interesting. I mean, she'd been saying strange things before, but
Mm-hmm.
she was in more of I would say by this stage, she was in at least moderate Alzheimer's and probably verging on late stage Alzheimer's. So although she'd only been diagnosed, as I say, in the year 2000, it had either advanced quite quickly or she'd had it before and we didn't know. And so she said things like, one day she said to me, "You love me." And I thought, yes, I didn't know if it was a question
Mm-hmm.
or, or a statement. Um, and I assured her that I did. And then immediately after, she said, "I'm a bad person." And I thought, oh, poor mummy, you know,
Yeah.
she's so frail. And I was feeling love and compassion for her. And I need to fill you in at this stage a little bit because, although she was frail and I felt deep compassion for her at that point, she had had an extremely difficult life. She suffered from mental instability, depression. She threatened suicide. I mean, when I was a young child, I witnessed her threatening suicide a number of times.
Wow.
Her, she had no control over her emotions at times. It was extremely difficult. And that actually set up quite a challenging relationship because as a child, I couldn't trust her.
Mm-hmm.
And as our lives progressed together, we loved each other, but there was some reservation there. So this, you love me and I'm a bad person. I thought, oh, I think I know where this might be coming from. And I might
Mm-hmm.
have triggered it because I'm, standing right in front of her. Anyway, Carl Jung said something that I think is useful to know. He said something like, in diminished, um, oh dear, um, emotions, repressed immaterial arises in diminished consciousness, something
Interesting.
to that
Yeah.
effect. And I thought, I think that's what's happening here.
Uh-huh.
These old memories are just popping up out of nowhere. And, most people would say, have another cup of tea, just try and ignore it.
Right.
But I wanted to find out what was going on. I didn't want to ignore it. I wanted to help her and I didn't want her to suffer distress. So we talked about the things that had been troubling her. And I used it as an NLP, it's called an NLP presupposition, which I think is really useful in situations like this. I said, we all do the best we can at the time. Otherwise, we'd have done something different. And it's very easy in retrospect to look back and say, oh, I wish I'd done this or I wish I'd done that. But at the time, we did the best we could. And I could see that just saying that lifted a whole weight off her. And she smiled and we moved on.
That's a good thing for all of us to remember that
Yes.
we blame ourselves and we feel guilty and we should have done this in the past. But can you just say that again? At the time, we did the best we could?
At the time, we do the best we can.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we would have done something different, no matter how bizarre that might seem.
Mm-hmm.
That it's easy in retrospect when you gain knowledge and the experience to look back and think, how did I do that? Or I shouldn't have done that. But at the time, taking everything into consideration, we did the best we could.
Excellent. Thank you.
So do you want me to
I
continue?
do. I didn't mean to interrupt, but I just think that was such a gem of advice for all of us right now who might have something that we're not letting go of or we feel guilty of. So Back to your story.
Yes.
Thank
Um,
you. So you said
be-
that to your mom.
yes, I said that to her. And I noticed there was a progression. Then because I'm also a healer, I, I quite often would just allow energy to flow towards her, healing energy to flow towards her. And she always noticed it, which I thought was really amazing, because you can do that to lots of people and they wouldn't have a clue what was going
Hmm.
on. But she noticed it. And then she said, when you see little bits flying around, you'll know it's me. And I thought, she's talking about her energy. She's tuned in to the fact that I energy. And and I think she might be imagining herself in a non-physical state. And as I was thinking that, she said, I'm not dead yet.
Oh, wow.
And then shortly after that, she said, I really felt that there was trust building between us, through these conversations. Then she said, it's difficult living between two worlds. And I thought,
Oh,
wow.
wow.
Now, a medical doctor would have dismissed that instantly as delusional
Right.
or, hallucination. But with my background in, study of consciousness and seeker of consciousness, um, I was really interested in this and wanted to find out more. And that was an absolutely pivotal point in the story, because if I had dismissed that, there would have been no story. But actually, that was the beginning of our story. And I started, just for the benefit of your listeners, because she was saying these interesting things, I started to write them down. And this is a discipline that's familiar to me because as a psychotherapist, I write down notes when I've been with clients. So I did the same as soon as I would write notes when I was with her permission, and then have a look at them independently, when I was on my own. And as this went on, I thought she was going to die quite soon, because
Sure.
she told me, she said, relatives visit me, they help me. Now, it's recorded, people who've studied this say that when people start having deceased relatives visit them, they're often close to the end of their lives.
Hmm.
It might be, the most a week or two, but it's often just, a few hours. So I was quite distressed, thinking, and she was saying, is it all right if I go? And I was saying, well, yes, but I don't really want to go. And anyway, I started writing down what she was saying, and little did I know that we would continue having conversations for 3.5 years.
Wow.
And I think if I'd known at the time, it would have been a task too daunting to embark on. But
Right.
I just got more and more fascinated, deeper and deeper into the journey with her. And this is something that I think is quite useful for people to think about. When people have Alzheimer's, they often, it's hard to understand what they're saying
Hmm.
because they can't. And the reason is they can't remember the words they want to use. So they use other words as substitute words. And you have to, it's a bit like um, translating a foreign language. To get to the meaning of what they're communicating, you have to dig around a little bit. And so I was doing that and able to keep up with, what she was telling me. Much of it was in metaphorical language. But I also, it's important to join them on their journey, and to join them on their map of the world,
Okay.
rather than telling them that they're wrong or dismissing what they're saying. I was, after hearing it's difficult working in between two worlds, I thought, I want to know about this.
Yes.
And my mother knew that. She became more and more intuitive. And the more that I validated her, what she was saying, the more she told me. And so I went with her when she was telling me things, and I could, I don't know at which point to say this, but there were lots of things that she told me from the other world. And I just preface this by saying that at this stage in Alzheimer's, people have given up the fight. I'm talking about the stage when They're no longer struggling to maintain control.
Okay.
They've sort of surrendered. They've lost their sense of self. Um, they've often lost their sense of linear time, and they're just there. And that's when they slip in. They have altered states of consciousness, and they just slip into another world. And this other world is a world that was absolutely fascinating to me, and one that I really wanted to know about.
As do we. So tell
Yes.
us what she
So
said. I'm like a little kid at Christmas. Like I just want to unwrap.
yes, right. She said, television, it's amazing. I can go there and ask all my questions. Now, her television, I think, was it was her portal to the other world, and I think it was her third eye, because speaking to psychics, they describe, the information they're getting as if it's coming through a television. I've had conversations with psychics, so she was naturally and quite unself-consciously accessing the other world through her, in quotes, television.
Okay.
And I'll just tell you some of the things that she said, because I want to quote her story.
Sure.
I'm just the messenger.
Yeah.
Something she said about thought, I think, is interesting. She said, the thought process, it's amazing. On another occasion, she said, I don't have any brain cells left, but I still think, or I'm still thinking. And I thought that was interesting, because that's very much what we're told about the other world, that thought continues.
Right.
In this world, she had life reviews. She said, I'm remembering all my life, all the people. And I thought, that sounds to me like a life review, so let's go there.
Sure.
And I suppose I was holding a safe space for her to venture into these areas that were coming up. She also had surgery. She said, it's difficult. I've had a big operation. They've taken things out. And when I asked her where, she said, my mind, they're very skillful. And I thought, this is energetic. Nobody had been around, performing physical operations on her. And she had quite a few operations. She described quite a few operations and said, I'm getting better. And at the non-physical level, I can confirm that. She got better and better. And I think that energies, non-physical energies were working on her, because she was so open to this happening and safe. She said, I have like a first aid box. I can go there. I can go to it at any time and get what I need. And when I asked her, how do you do that? She said, I asked them. And I thought, well, ask them, it shall be given. So I think if we are really, really open, we can ask, and it's there. She also had what I imagine was an out-of-body experience. She said, let's see, my head's not attached to my body. Well, I've had an out-of-body experience, and I wouldn't have described it quite like that. It was a spontaneous out-of-body experience, and it wasn't a near-death experience. It was very pleasant. But my head is not attached to my body sounds like extreme, disassociation. Right. But she wasn't disassociated in other ways. So she also had out-of-body travel. And I used to have little chats with her about things that I thought were happening. And one of them, when she described, she said, I love to float over the oceans. And I thought, this sounds like astral travel to me. Sure. So then I talked to her a little about astral travel, and she was always very eager to listen to me. And after the following day, she said, my brother asked me to visit him, and I did. Now, her brother had already passed on. And it seemed to me that by talking to her about astral travel, it gave her permission to do that. But she also said, I don't want to do too much. And I said, wise woman, because she was still needed to be grounded here. She was still here. Um, Other things, she became very psychic, and there were lots of examples of extrasensory perception. I could give you a few of them.
Sure.
Um, on one occasion, I had sent her a Mother's Day card that I'd made for her, and it had 12 red roses on it because I couldn't be with her on Mother's Day. And when I went up to visit her about a week later, I was looking for this card in her room, and it wasn't there. I didn't see anything. And then she said to me, "The lost roses." And I thought, oh, the physical card may have been lost, but she knew about it.
Right.
And not only did she pick up on the image that I was holding in my mind, she picked up on the fact that it was lost. But to me, that showed me that nothing was lost.
Wow.
You know, there were other occasions when, on one occasion, I had a meeting with our family's lawyer to discuss. By this time I was managing all the family, arrangements, and this was a very difficult meeting. I was going to have to make decisions, and I was feeling very uncomfortable about it.
Sure.
And I hadn't discussed it. I certainly had not discussed it with her or anybody else. And I walked in, having just come off the train from London, and she said, Margaret, she called me Margaret. Margaret is dealing with funds and finance. Margaret is a little confused.
Wow. And you were?
Oh, well, I can't hide anything. What else have I done? Because it might be easy to think that, if there was something I wanted her to know about, that somehow I was communicating that. But in this case, I did not want her to know about this. But she nevertheless did. And there were at least 8 occasions when she told me information about things that were happening to me that were true and that she had no other way of knowing. And that to me was the strongest evidence that if that information was accurate, then why should I question the other information she was giving me about the other world?
Mm-hmm.
So it was interesting. I think I probably needed that evidence, and she gave it to me.
And it's so fascinating, Maggie. Just because I know, and one of the hopes that I have is when our body dies, that little voice inside of our head, the negative one, disappears.
Yeah.
And I just have this feeling that your mom was losing that connection with that voice, and yet um, tapping into her consciousness, I guess, and just being aware of everything. And somehow I have friends who have dealt with parents with Alzheimer's and had some really, really tough times. And maybe you can speak a little bit more, because I know the title of your book is The Gift of Alzheimer's, and it's hard sometimes to see the gift in things like that. So any advice you could share with maybe somebody that's got a parent or a loved one
Well,
suffering?
I want to share my hypothesis about Alzheimer's,
Yes, let's hear it.
because I think there's something happening in late stage Alzheimer's that has not until now been recognized. And that is when somebody reaches this stage of surrender and they've kind of lost their sense of self and they're forgetful, their ego has gone out of the window, past and future all rolled into one in the present. If somebody is in the present, in the now, without an ego, they're in a transcendental state. This is the message of Edgar Tolle. It's what his message in his book, The Power of Now.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think when people reach this late stage of Alzheimer's, I don't think they have intermittent altered states of consciousness, my question is, what is happening in these altered states? And I really believe that if they are held with kind of a trusted companion, someone they feel safe, someone who they know understands or has an awareness of what's happening to them, they can safely, if you like, leave their physical body or partly leave their physical body and enter this other world. And fortunately, my mother retained her faculty of speech right to the end, although it became very limited towards the end. But she was able to tell me these things. And I think that's a possibility for lots of people. And the more I wrote a blog post about coming out about Alzheimer's, because until I wrote my book, nobody had talked about this. But the more I speak to people, the more they say, oh yes, something like that was happening with my mum.
Interesting.
So I think there is a possibility. So that's one of the gifts. And it's not just a gift for the person with Alzheimer's, it's a gift for the family with them. It's a wonderful gift.
There's
And,
a
sorry.
sorry to interrupt. No, I'm just thinking I had just taken a seminar, and one of the classes that I took was on improv comedy. And the only reason I'm bringing this up is because you have to be so present and so paying attention to the other person, no matter what they say, that you can't be contemplating what you're going to say next because you don't know what's going to come out of their mouth. And I think, although I haven't dealt with a person with Alzheimer's, but if what you're saying, and this is in my words, that if we can just be with the person and love them who they are and be in that present moment and listen and trust, and so that they have trust that they can say anything. And it's like maybe being with a new person every time and trying not to let our ego or our little voice take over and, oh, they should be this way or they should be that way. And I'm sure our systems are going to be pulling for sadness and this isn't mom or this isn't dad. But if we can train ourselves and practice to just be 100% with who they are today, maybe that'll allow for some of these stories to come out, or them feeling safe enough to share, and it could be maybe a different kind of adventure to the end.
Absolutely. What you said is absolutely true. Love is the gateway to the other world. And
Oh,
I think without love, this would be difficult. But when love is in place, miracles can happen. And being present in the moment is really love, and being present in the moment is all that people need to do. The rest will unfold.
yeah.
And it's it's love that comes straight from the heart. People who have Alzheimer's don't, it's not calculated. Everything's direct. The filters that we have that sort of keep everything tightly and comfortably in place, they've gone. So when love is there, it just flows out. And this means it's an opportunity to heal relationships, and it's never too late to heal the past. In fact, it's a wonderful past.
Say more about that.
Well, as I said earlier about my mother and me, that we had a challenging relationship, but I felt love towards her. And I'll just dip into a little neuroscience here, which I discovered afterwards about this, which I thought was really interesting. Researchers at the University of California, San Francisco Memory and Aging Center studied people with Alzheimer's, and they found that as cognition decreases, empathy increases. And this continues. So as brain cells die off, empathy gets greater. And that means that people with Alzheimer's become exceptionally sensitive to our nuances of expression and voice tone and mood. And not only that, they then start to mimic us and give that information back to us. This is called in the language, in the jargon, emotional contagion. So if we're feeling love and compassion towards them, they will pay, and they're feeling it too. They will feed that back to us. I mean, we can get into a beautiful symbiotic relationship in which it just becomes more and more loving,
That is so cool. It,
isn't it?
it is. And also I'm thinking we don't have to wait until somebody has Alzheimer's to practice this.
No, because actually it's true. It's true in life generally.
Sure.
But in Alzheimer's, we have a huge responsibility um, to be in a good state when we're with people with Alzheimer's because they are very vulnerable to whatever state we're in.
Wow. Maggie, I'm looking at my clock and I know we
Oh,
only have about 5 minutes left.
sorry.
But what is there in your heart that maybe could make a difference in someone's life right now, or if you have any closing thoughts? You're just a gem, and
Oh,
I'm
thank
excited
you.
to read both of your books actually, because I'm really intrigued with kinesiology for the little bit that I've played with it. It's incredible. But what else would you like to share?
Well, I, Alzheimer's is a protracted end of life experience. It, sometimes people have illnesses and they die quite quickly or they don't know when they're going to die. But with Alzheimer's, there's a long stretch of time. That means we have time to engage in the process of conscious dying. And we have time to, it's a wonderful opportunity to engage in conscious dying. And there's not enough time here to go into why I think my mother's Alzheimer's was an intelligent process of dying. There's absolutely no doubt about that. She knew what she was doing every step of the way. And she talked about programs. She had programs for learning. She had supervision. She had tests. And she had quite a few series of them. Her journey towards the transition to the other world was a highly intelligent one. And I suggest that people look out for this. It's maybe there, kind of hidden in the midst of confusion. And people, when they go into these altered states, they have access to the other world. They have access to the Akashic field or the universal information field, and they have no fear of death. Because in that other world, there isn't fear. And my mother said, I have no fear. Death is nothing to be afraid of. We're learning we're immortal. There's no pain.
That's great. I had a friend of mine, Maggie, whose father had Alzheimer's. In the last 2 years of his life, he couldn't speak. Very rarely something would come out of his mouth, and he was in the fetal position and all that. And my instinct now is that Dad was still there, that he was just maybe in this higher state of consciousness and high level of empathy. And I know the family gave him lots of love and things like that. But even in one of those situations, I think that it's all about who we're being. Like we really can still send the love. And then when it's
Well, we need to be present in ourselves first. And it's from that place of stillness and presence that we can really give in a way that the energy that they can receive, I think. My mother and I spent a long time in silent eye contact, which I found quite difficult, but it brought me to being present. And as she progressed, I'll just give you a couple more things that she said.
Sure.
She said, I love everyone. She was in a universal world of love. I love everyone, and love never dies. So she taught me about love. She taught me about unconditional love.
That's
And
beautiful.
it's changed my life.
You mentioned, I'll just say this quickly, having the eye contact. One of the courses I took, I had to sit face to face with another individual with no words and just look into their eyes. And I can't remember if it was 5 minutes or 10 minutes, but it was really hard to do at the beginning. And then
Yeah.
what happened after we got through with all the giggles and all that is all that was there was just love, just being with another being,
Yes.
whether they were man, woman, old, young, it didn't matter. And love showed up. So maybe I'll challenge our listeners, if you want to play with this a little, is just find someone you love or care for, or maybe a new friend, and just do that. Look into their eyes and just see if you can quiet the mind and just be present and just have love when you're looking into their eyes. So Maggie, our time has come to an end, and I'm sorry about that, but we can always continue another time. But
Oh,
it was really a pleasure to have you here today.
well, thank you so much, Sandra. I've really enjoyed talking with you.
Yeah, me too. And we'll chat more. And for our listener today, thank you for being here. I want to remind you that you can listen to Maggie's episode and the other episodes on we don't die radio.com. I have a lovely picture of the beautiful Maggie and a link to her books and her website and her blog and all of those great things. And I do have a favor to ask. If this show has made a difference for you or any of the past shows, if you could either leave a rating on iTunes or even on your Facebook page or LinkedIn or Twitter, whatever you use, maybe share this episode. You just never know who in their life is suffering right now, who they don't, many of us don't suffer in public, so you never know, but just seeing a link on one of your social media pages might be just the thing. And so our guest today was Maggie La Tourelle, and her new book is The Gift of Alzheimer's. You can get that at thegiftofalzheimers.com and read more about it. My name is Sandra Champlain. I've been your host on We Don't Die Radio. I do believe with all of my heart that life is an education for the soul and that your life here on earth is important. So thank you for listening, and we'll see you soon.